Please be seated. The chamber is now back in session, and I would like to give the floor to the International Deputy Co-Prosecutor to present the key documents. You may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was in the second group of documents. This is documents, evidence of relating to Sector 13 and the Southwest Zone, showing that before, around the same time, and after the meeting alleged by Salvan that, in fact, killings of Lon Nol personnel continued and took place. I want to turn to Anchor Shea district. This was another district in Sector 13. It's the district where this alleged meeting took place. And document E319/19.3.125 is a statement from a person who was a member of the commune committee in Anchor Shea district in Sector 13. At answers 10 through answer 17, answers 10 through answer 17, he describes how 1 or 2 weeks after the fall of the Lon Nol regime, pursuant to orders from the upper echelon, former Lon Nol soldiers, and I quote, holding ranks of second lieutenant and higher, were called to a meeting, taken away, and killed. Another district in Sector 13 was Kiravong district. Document E319/13.3.20 was a statement from a witness who was a chief of a 10-household unit in the Lon Nol regime. And this is at answers 15 through answer 25 and answers 37 through answer 44 of the statement. He describes being part of a group of 180 Lon Nol soldiers, as well as 10 and 50 household unit chiefs, who in October of 1975 were gathered at a pagoda in Kiravong by Ye Bo. Ye Bo, who at that time was a member of the Kiravong District Committee. He describes how this group of 180 Lon Nol soldiers and officials were taken to the forest and killed. He was fortunate enough to escape. Ye Bo, I will remind you, was the sister of Ye Bun, and she was the person who became the district chief in King Swai district, the district that Salvan went to after Tramcock. Also from Kiravong district, document E3/9598, E3/9598, answers 14 through answer 15. This witness describes a meeting chaired by Kiravong District Secretary Tatit, who was the brother-in-law of Tamok. This was a meeting in late 1976 or early 1977. At answers 14 to 15, he states, quote, I attended a meeting chaired by Tatit at Wat Pre Rumdung, and Tatit declared Ui Sim, a former Lon Nol official, as a traitor. At that meeting, Ui Sim was shackled and ordered to walk around to identify those who had served in the Lon Nol administration. I have never seen Ui Sim again. He must have been taken to be killed. Tatit declared that he was Angkar's enemy. And some references from some other districts that were also part of the Southwest Zone. Bati district in Sector 33 of the Southwest Zone. And I'm reading here from Meng Tri Yi's book, E3/2120, or 2120 and 2121. Meng Tri Yi did extensive, this is a book about Southwest Zone security offices. And at English 00416-382, Khmer 01098-793, no French translation. Meng Tri writes the following about Bati district. Quote, Chin, Bati district chief from 1970 to 75, saw lists of prisoners held at the district re-education center. He explained that those on the execution lists were listed by name and duty. He observed that in early 1976, there were many more Lon Nol soldiers and policemen than in other categories. End of quote. On the same year-end pages, Meng Tri also writes about Pre Kaba district in Sector 33 of the Southwest Zone. Quote, in mid-1975, Toi, chief of Kampang subdistrict, received the district party's plan to seek out, arrest, and send Lon Nol soldiers to the upper echelon. After obtaining their personal histories, Toi ordered the arrest of many and sent reports on them to the Pre Kaba District Committee. And I'll note here, remind your honors, that the chief of Pre Kaba District was Tamak's younger brother, Chong. Last district that I will discuss from the Southwest Zone is Kien Svai District, the very district that Sao Van and Ye Bo, who we talked about earlier, were assigned to in 1976. E3/4659. E3/4659 is an interview of a base person from Kien Svai District conducted by SOAS. And this is what that witness stated took place after the Southwest, after Bao and the Southwest cadres came. Quote, the Southwest zoners replaced the East zoners. The East zoners liberated this area, the troops of Chan Chakri, who was later arrested. Bao often came to inspect. She was fat, dark, and short, a good speaker, and vicious. If she pointed somebody out, they were dead. The security office was established when Bao and Tlang came. This is a person who's identified as the security head of the security office. Continuing, the Southwest zoners began looking for teachers and others. The chairman of work units and cooperatives would make reports to Tlang, and then they would be arrested. My brother-in-law, Nu Yan, then about 50 plus, was arrested in Chu Til subdistrict at Rusay Srok. He had worked as a minor functionary at Public Works and was accused by people in the village of being a major. And I also refer your honors to a DC CAM statement, E3/5637, from another witness from Kien Svai District, who also discusses an incident in which information about prisoner arrest accused of being a second lieutenant. Concluding with my third group of documents, on which I will be very brief. The third group of documents is evidence as to documentary evidence confirming that arrests and executions of Lon Nol officers continued after May or June 1975. That is, after the time of the meeting alleged by Sao Van. There are three groups of documents I will briefly refer your honors to. E3/832, E3/832, a document you're familiar with. It's a list dated the 4th of June, 1975, identifying 17 traders that the party had examined and decided are to be smashed. It is from Comrade Pinn, who was the chairman or secretary of Division 703. What I want to note about this document today is who the people are. Of the 17 traders on this list that the party decided to smash in June 1975, it includes 1 colonel, 5 lieutenant colonels, 3 majors, 1 captain, 5 first lieutenants, and 1 second lieutenant. These are all people of ranks between second lieutenant and colonel, the group that Salvan said were not to be harmed. S-21 records, again, I will just briefly reference these. I've used some of these in court. Document E3-1539 is a list of 162 Law Knoll soldiers, officials, and family members who were executed or died of sickness at S-21 between the 22nd and 30th of March 1976. And what I want to note specifically for your honors today is that this list includes 4 colonels, 11 lieutenant colonels, 5 majors, 6 captains, 17 first lieutenants, and 14 second lieutenants. Again, clearly proving that Law Knoll soldiers with these ranks were still being arrested and killed following the meeting described by Salvan. Another S-21 document, just to refer you to, E3/3973, E3/3973. This is an S-21 execution log. And if you, on pages Khmer 0006642 through 6646, English 00837 571 through 581, French 00875 960 through 976. This part of this execution log contains a list of 206 Law Knoll military detained and executed at S-21. The same document also has a list of 60 former civil servants of the old regime who were executed. Last, your honors, I will just make brief reference to the fact that there are also records from Tramcock District, Salvan's district, showing that in 1977 there were major arrests and killings of Law Knoll officers. I won't repeat this because this is something I have already done a presentation to you. I'll simply remind you that one of those documents, E3-2048, is a report from the very commune that Salvan came from, Chiang Torn Commune, which refers to the, I quote, successive instructions from Ankar to purge enemy officers. And I will conclude by referring you to research by Henri Locard and Meng Tri Yi, both of whom reviewed the surviving the surviving Krang Tachan and Tramcock records, and found that half of the prisoners sent to Krang Tachan were former Law Knoll soldiers and policemen. The references for you, Henri Locard's report titled Tramcock District in the Grip of the Khmer Rouge document, D, I don't have the E3 number, but I have the previous number, D313/1.2.16. And the Khmer ERN 00739-044, English 00217-700 through 701, French 00743-759 through 760, and the same conclusion from Meng Tri E, who reviewed those records in his book, Chain of Terror, E3 2120, and the reference I have for you is English 00416-399. Your Honors, that concludes our presentation on the policy targeting Lon Nol. I thank you for the time.
President, thank you. Now the chamber gives the floor to the Defense Counsel for Khieu Samphan. You may now proceed, Counsel.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, everyone. I will also engage in this fastidious exercise of reviewing a number of documents. Let me point out that it was very difficult and complicated for the Khieu Samphan team to choose these documents because we didn't know the final decision or position of the chamber regarding the appearance of certain expert witnesses. I'm thinking of 2 TCE 92, 2 TCE 97, and 2 TCE 99. And it is obvious that some documents can only be useful and understandable if we know the position of the chamber regarding persons who have studied the matter in an in-depth manner. In any case, on the charm segment, the document that I would like to present to the chamber and to the parties is an extract of a radio broadcast of Democratic Cambodia on 23rd of October 1975, document E3/272. This document exists only in English, and the ERN is 00167-520. It is a broadcast, so it is propaganda, and I admit to that, but it is important to note that in such propaganda, they are referring to Muslims. The title of the broadcast is in English.
Et l'intérêt de cette...
And this radio broadcast is relevant in that it shows that on the 23rd of October 1975, it was important to present the group of Cham Muslims as part of the revolution and as persons participating in the revolutionary effort. So they were therefore participating in production in the country. I also refer you to another document, the excerpt of a transcript in 002/1, and that is why I'm referring to it today. It is document E1/192.1. It is an excerpt of an interrogation of a shot, and it was at about 9:37. He was being questioned at the time by my colleague Kope, and he refers to the issue of the Vietnamese and the Cham in general terms, and the excerpt begins at 9:37. I will focus on the last part of expert shorts answer. And the question put to him by Mr. Kope was as follows. To follow up on your answer on Monday, you pronounced the word begins with GE, that is genocide. I will not put any legal questions to you on that subject, of course. And I'm speaking to the chamber because I want the chamber to clarify whether or not a genocide was committed. In ERN 00396662, you state that the Khmer Rouge did not try to exterminate an ethnic or religious group or national group, whether we're talking of the Vietnamese, the Cham, or others. Are you categorical in saying that, in your opinion, there was no such policy? By using the word that begins with GE, can you explain what you mean? And expert short answer was as follows. It is very difficult to answer the question without using that term. I'll quote George Orwell. There are times when the first duty of a person is to say one thing or the other. The definition of a word can be very dangerous because the word may not say what it really means. We were in a very turbulent zone, and it is very difficult. I am convinced that there was no attempt to exterminate any ethnic group, regardless of what it was. The situation in Cambodia is completely different from that of Rwanda. In that case, we know that there was an attempt to exterminate the Jews. As for the Tutsis, they were exterminated because they were Tutsi. That did not happen in democratic Kampuchea. The Chams are often referred to as an example to prove that that was the case. There was an attempt, it said that there was an attempt to exterminate them. For the Cham, the problem was that they were deeply rooted in Cambodia, which is different from that of the Jews and the Tutsis. Pol Pot wanted to make everyone equal, and there was pressure on everyone to be equal. As for the Chams, they were dispersed across the country as part of the savage rebellion, savage revolt against the revolution. But we cannot say that they were trying to exterminate any particular group. End of quote. Free translation. That was the position of Mr. Short, testifying in the first trial segment. Let me now talk about the segment on the Vietnamese. And here, I'll continue saying what expert Short said, and it's document E3/9, an excerpt of the book Pol Pot, The Anatomy of a Nightmare, and the ERN in French, which is of relevance to us, is 00639-721 up to 25. And in English, it is 00396406, and the excerpt that is of interest to me continues up to 09. Unfortunately, there is no Khmer translation of the document. In the first extract, which is of relevance to me, expert Short talks of the historic conflict between Cambodia and Vietnam, and it is important to note that he confirms what we have heard before this chamber on several occasions in witness testimonies, and I'll refer you to Kum Sarat at the hearing of E1/38/3.1 of 25th of January 2016, in which he explains that he had heard of problems with Vietnam dating back to the time of his father, and it's 9 hours 24 and 24 seconds. It was also referred to by Mi Vun at the hearing of 2000. We didn't get the specific date. I wanted to put things in perspective regarding our presentation. We are in French 00639-722, and expert Short refers to what happened with the Vietnamese under the Lon Nol regime, and this is what it states at the end of the page. When it discovered that Canton Fodder wasn't sufficient defense against the hereditary enemy, the Lon Nol targeted civilians. A curfew was imposed only to Vietnamese, and for their security, entire families were housed in makeshift camps. Contrary to previous protests against the coup d'etat in which no one had been killed or wounded, this time we were facing a real pogrom. And it continues giving an example as regards what happened with bodies and the events of the 18th of April or the 10th of April during the Lon Nol regime. This is just to say that as regards the Vietnamese, the problems that may have occurred were not created by the Democratic Kampuchea government, but that these excesses were committed against the Vietnamese as part of problems that dated back before the Khmer Rouge period. This issue also comes up again in an article by Henri Locard of the Cambodia Daily, the 15th of April 2014, in document E3/7283. ERN in English is 00993774, and it continues on the next page. ERN in Khmer is 01142445, and ERN in French, particularly as regards the part of relevance to me. Unfortunately, there's no French version. It is an article that was written in English and was translated into Khmer. In this article, Henri Locard revisits the issue of Vietnamese under the Lon Nol regime, and he also talks about this, and we don't want to return to this later. He also says something about the charm, and this part is quoted in English, is 00993774. It's the last paragraph on the page.
As for the Vietnamese, there were the least unfortunate of all Cambodian residents, since the some 300,000 Vietnamese citizens who had been spared the London pogroms in 1970 were required to leave the country. Not only did most of them take the opportunity to run away from the hated regime, but Sino-Khmer, or Khmers with snippets of Vietnamese language, also desperately tried to go through the border. We must not forget either that genocide is a politically charged term in this country and has been used since January 1979 for political expediency. As to the Chams, indeed, they were victimized more than other groups, but this was not because of their ethnicity, but because they rebelled en masse in Krokchmar district in Kampong Cham province, for instance, and refused to abstain from performing their daily prayers. All religions were banned, except the worship of Angkar, with its rituals and vast meetings. Fin de citation.
End of quote. And Henri Locard continues in this article with the fact that when we compare the massacres that took place with regard to the other inhabitants, he cannot conclude that there was a specific desire to exterminate the Cham. And now I'd like to get back to another excerpt from Philip Short's book, E3/9, in which he speaks about the repatriation of about 150,000 Vietnamese people between 1973 and 1976. This excerpt, which is at French ERN 00639-840, English ERN 00396506, is interesting because it refers to an incident that was discussed or that were by witness Prum Sarat at the hearing of 27 January last, document E1/383.1, as of 11:10 and 04 seconds in the morning, when he was answering a question that was put to him by Judge Lavergne. And this is the excerpt that I would like to quote. Here the witness, the expert witness, is speaking about the relations between Vietnam and Cambodia, and he says, at the beginning of the month of August, Le Duan gave the Cambodians the possibility, when he traveled to Phnom Penh, that the Vietnamese paper Nhan Dan called cordial. A few days, Dong Van Linh announced to Nuon Chea that the Vietnamese units had evacuated Wai Island and were getting ready to release 600 Cambodian prisoners of war. End of quote. And I will stop here for a moment in order to tell you that it is this incident that Prum Sarat described during the hearing of 27 January that I was talking about. So let me get back. So the exchange of further messages contained clear messages of solidarity and friendship. And liaison offices were established in the border provinces. And the border scuffles stopped. The repatriation of Vietnamese families from Cambodia continued, however. We believe that between April and December, 150,000 Vietnamese went back to Vietnam, whereas thousands of Cambodian refugees who had fled the Khmer Rouge were traveling in the other direction. End of quote. So this is an excerpt that is important in historical terms to remind the back and forth changes in the relations between Vietnamese and Cambodians, to confirm that there were indeed Cambodian soldiers who had been captured, and at one point in time, at the very beginning at least, when the Khmer Rouge seized power in Phnom Penh, in any case, after 17 April 1775, there were negotiations that continued over several months, and this is something that I would like to focus on a little bit later. And another document that I would like to focus on is an excerpt from an article by François Ponchot, document E3/4589, and ERN French 00283-070, Khmer ERN 003223-746, and English 00323-699. And what's interesting here is that this is an article that is dated 10 January 1976, with all of the caution, of course, that we must take with regard to statements made by refugees. In this article, however, François Ponchot describes what he heard from certain refugees at the border, the Thai border. And in this excerpt, which ends at ERN 70 in French, page 17 in the French version, in this excerpt, he speaks about the presence of Vietnamese in certain regions of Cambodia, and at that date, 10 January 1976, and he's asking if they are still present. And this is what Ponchot writes. On the contrary, it seems that the Vietnamese from Cambodia had the possibility of going back to their original country as of the beginning of June. In Cham Ka Lu, a Viet Cong officer, he said in this version, the National Liberation Front of South Vietnam came on 3 June to tell the population that the 3 people of Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos were brothers, and that if the Vietnamese wanted to go back to their country, they could. Several people from Phnom Penh therefore pretended to be Vietnamese and therefore left as of 6 June for Vietnam. And on the way, they met many Viet Cong cadres who had settled in Cambodia for several years, who were going home to Vietnam with their families and all of their possessions. These cadres were repatriated by truck, whereas he had to travel by foot. And I'd like to stop for a little while.
Effective.
Indeed, I'm sorry. I'll try to go a bit slower and to control myself. Now, in this excerpt, the question that was dealt with several times during this hearing, about the negotiations of the repatriation of certain cadres who were present in Cambodia still is discussed, and Poncho continues on the same page. At the same period, a doctor from Battambang was authorized to go to Saigon. Around July, a Vietnamese delegation came to seek out Vietnamese nationals in Tak Ma region and found 500 to 1,000 of them on each trip. And there were even more in the region of Ba Nam. One witness adds, around the end of October, 600 Vietnamese from the Battambang region were repatriated to Vietnam aboard 3 boats that set off from Mongol Moray and sailed via Phnom Penh, but were not able to make a stopover in Phnom Penh. On November 8, this is a witness speaking, when the paddy was almost ready for harvest, the authorities forced us, the Vietnamese in Kroch Ma, to leave Cambodia and go to Vietnam. Only 6 or 7 families were given permission to delay their departure. End of quote. So here again, these refugee accounts, such as related by Poncho, seem to indicate that there were indeed agreements between the Vietnamese government and the Cambodian government to repatriate Vietnamese nationals. And the mention of one Vietnamese delegation that came to look for Vietnamese nationals is something that's interesting to note here. And let's continue with more chronologically. And here I'm going to speak about an excerpt from the book by Philip Short, E3/9, and this time at French ERN 0063995, English 003965872, to the following page. And here we have seen that, chronologically speaking, there was a moment when both states were still negotiating with nationals traveling back to Vietnam, and with a desire indeed to discuss. And here we're coming close to 1977, 1978, and then in this excerpt, Philip Short is speaking about the presence of training camps for Khmer refugees in Vietnam. And it starts at French ERN 0063995, the 2 last sentences of the document. At the beginning of the summer 1978, the 2 main players in the drama that was unfolding, Vietnam and China, had overcome all of their hesitations and were getting ready for good for the denouement. And the Vietnamese built training camps for Khmer refugees in former U.S. military bases in the south of Vietnam. Le Duan and Le Duc Tho met for the first time people who were liable to lead the future Khmer resistance. Son Doc Min, who had led the Cambodian party at the beginning of the 1950s, succumbed to apoplexia in 1972, but some of his collaborators had remained in North Vietnam, where they had been joined by Khmer Rouge cadres who had fled after 1975. All of them were subordinate figures. Ben Sovan had worked for the Funk radio station at the beginning of the 1970s before holding a position as a commander in the Vietnamese army. Butong was a former Isarak fighter from the northeast. Hun Sen, a young Khmer Rouge commander, had defected in the summer of 1977, but they were the only available elements to create the core of a future post-Khmer Rouge regime. An intensive indoctrination program was started, and in April, they were able to constitute the first battalion of the future rebel army. End of quote. So this is, of course, is a contextual element that's important. I know that the Chamber made a distinction between the treatment of specific groups and armed conflict, but in the context of the defense's understanding, it's very, very difficult for us to make this distinction, especially based on what we heard from certain witnesses regarding acts of arrest or accusations of desertion or rebellion. So it's very, very difficult for us to place things back in their context and to understand what happened on the Vietnamese side as well as on the Vietnamese border, which indeed had an impact on what was happening within Cambodia. Another document that allows me to discuss as well these uprisings and these rebellions and these defections from the Khmer Rouge regime. It's an article from the Washington Post of 10 August 1978, document E3/7265, which only exists in English and in Khmer. English ERN, therefore, 00166-105. Khmer ERN 0108-1608 to the 1610. And I'm not going to leave the totality of the article, but simply an excerpt, in particular, the introduction in English, therefore.
Which is engaged in a bitter border war with Cambodia, is reporting that a rash of insurrection has erupted across that country over the past several weeks. Many of the alleged revolts are said to have been carried out by regular army units. Analysts in Washington say they have no way of confirming the reports put out by Vietnamese media and are suspicious that Hanoi is orchestrating a Cambodian revolutionary movement to bring pressure on Phnom Penh to settle their violent disputes. Je saute quelques paragraphes et je vais...
Let me skip a few paragraphs and I'm going to move on to the second column in the English.
The reports of the insurrection, always attributed to Cambodian defectors or prisoners of war, have been coming out 2 or 3 times a week since mid-June. At that time, a statement reputedly made by a former Cambodian battalion commander said that revolutionary forces have established a base to fight against Phnom Penh. The base was said to be in Cambodia's military zone 203, which intelligence sources believe is near Mimot, a Cambodian town about 6 miles from the Vietnamese border. Since then, uprisings are said to have taken place at scores of towns and villages in Cambodia. Most of them are in the eastern part of the country, places such as Snow, Nic Luang, and Svay Rieng. They have also included other parts of Cambodia, such as Battambang province in the far west and Kampong Thom in the north. One former Cambodian soldier told of civilians, including civil servants, plantation workers, and peasants, turning on cruel cadres and exterminating them with bombs and clubs.
And this was regarding the contextual elements, and to conclude, this is what the article states at the last paragraph.
Analysts believe that Hanoi is prepared to turn the pressure of the rebel movement up or down, depending on Phnom Penh's willingness to negotiate their quarrel. Fin de citation.
End of quote. So here again, an important contextual element regarding the surge or the intensification of what happened within Cambodia in the East Zone, and the intensification of the discussions, or of the end of the discussions between the Vietnamese and the Cambodians, and which culminates at the end of 1978, which we see when the Vietnamese arrived in January 1979. I'd like to refer you to a document E3/7310, which is a series of articles dated 5 December 1978, where here the creation of the United Front for the National Salvation of Cambodia is discussed. And this is a party that was created by the Cambodian refugees with the objective of overthrowing the Phnom Penh regime. And here you can see the official presentation of this party with a report. I'd like to refer you to document at ERN in English, S00013294, the first page of the document. Khmer ERN S01137152. And this is how the movement is presented in the first paragraph, which I will quote in English because there is no French translation.
An event of great historic importance took place recently in Cambodia. In an area of the liberated zone of Cambodia, a Congress of Representatives for the foundation of the Cambodian National Front for National Salvation was solemnly held and was crowned with success. Participating in the Congress were more than 200 representatives of all strata of the Cambodian patriotic population: workers, peasants, petty bourgeois, intellectuals, Buddhist monks and nuns, young people, women, Cambodian ethnic minorities, and patriotic insurgents who had abandoned the Pol Pot Ieng Sari administration and army. Fin de citation.
End of quote. And I'd like to refer you as well to another article which is part of this compilation of different articles regarding that period. I'd like to refer you, therefore, to an article from the Phnom Penh Home Service. It's at ERN in English, S00133305, and Khmer ERN. I'll have to check that again because I don't think I have the right reference here. In any case, the article is entitled in English
alleges Vietnam planting spies among refugees.
And here, once again, we have a contextual element that demonstrates that in 78, and especially at the end of 1978, there was discussion of defection, of rebellion and revolution, revolt, and also there's discussion of groups who are opposing themselves to the Phnom Penh regime. And I'd also like to refer you to document E3/7315, which is also a series of articles and broadcasts from SWB, Far Eastern Relations.
Donc 25
So 25 October 1978 is the date. And here on the first page of the document, in particular S0113715 in Khmer, and in English S0001329 to the following pages, where the different or where different articles speak about the presence of armed divisions, Vietnamese armed divisions in particular. And here the first page of the document gives an example in an article of 24 October 1978 from the Bangkok Post, in which, and I will quote in English,
Vietnamese divisions, fully manned, at 60,000 and fully equipped, have occupied Cambodian territory along the one length of the eastern border, according to intelligence reports reaching Thai military authorities. Cambodian resistance forces, backed by the Vietnamese, have occupied Kampong Cham, Ratanakiri, Snoil, and other strategic places east of the Mekong River, the report says. Two
paragraphs further, and the text continues.
Overthrow the Pol Pot government from inside is building up towards the dry season, which starts in 2 months. It is believed that the Cambodian resistance forces, supplied with arms and ammunition by trains from southern Vietnam, could make the coup effective and quick. Fin de citation.
End of quote. This is an example, as many others in this document, of articles discussing the advances of internal rebellious movements in democratic Kampuchea that were supported by Vietnam. Another point that I would like to discuss regarding the Vietnamese is an excerpt from document E3/3995, which is an article from Steve Heder, ERN. And the excerpt that I'm interested in particular is Steve Heder's analysis of the expression a Khmer body with a Vietnamese head, which was discussed many times during the proceedings here. And this is document E3/3995 at ERN French 0080283. Khmer ERN 008444612. And to the following page, and English ERN 007737767. And I'd like to specify that this article is entitled Racism, Marxism, Cataloging, and Genocide in the Pol Pot regime from Ben Kiernan. And this article is a critique of Bernd Kiernan's book. And this is what is stated at the reference that I provided to you by Steve Heder. In his attempt to argue otherwise, Kiernan highlights the fact that many of the East Stone victims were stigmatized with the epithet Klum Khmer Kbal Yuen, which he translates as Khmer bodies with Vietnamese minds, and which he suggests racialized those killed. This phrase, which might also be translated by Khmer bodies with Vietnamese heads, has also been used historically to conjure up images of Khmer political structures under Vietnamese leadership. And Kiernan's argument that the phrase was used to suppress the Khmer majority on the racial grounds that they were not really Khmer is at best incomplete. Instead, the phrase suggests political leadership and political orientation were considered more important than any biologically determined physical characteristics. Being physically or racially Khmer was no protection. Treason to the class and national cause was political and could not be committed by anyone regardless of skin who was suspected of refusal to accept and be loyal to the correct political line of the proletarian vanguard leadership. End of quote. So this critique is important because when we speak about genocide, and this was often pointed out by the prosecution that we're speaking about race, Steve Hedder provides a different context and reminds us that the issue was not race, but the issue was politics and a political position. And this is an element, a critique that we find also with Henri Local's book, because in the document E3/7280, a document that unfortunately only exists in French, ERN 0099785818. It's an article that is entitled A Nearsighted Vision of Cambodia, which was published in Le Monde Daily on 28 April 1978. And as Steve Hedder, Henri Local criticizes Bin Kiernan's arguments, and he says the following, and I'm going to try to, of course, 28th of April 1998, apologizes the interpreter, 1978, so ERN 00995818, the last paragraph in the French version. It is obviously impossible to verify the multiple evidence that Kiernan proposes to support his arguments. I have, among many others, noted three manipulations of the facts that are clear, that were destined to include the Khmer Rouge universe within this narrow context of the axioms set by the author. 1. Despite his findings, Kiernan does not manage to prove that the ethnic minorities were particularly targeted by the repression. If the strong Vietnamese minority was expelled and therefore spared, the anti-Vietnamese feelings within the Khmer population existed way before the Khmer Rouge and unfortunately are still widespread today. Never, contrary to the assertions by Hanoi that Kiernan puts in his book, there was on the part of the leaders of Democratic Kampuchea any attempt to reconquer former Cochin China. The Cham, essentially religious, Muslim and non-racial minority, a Khmer can become Cham by marriage, died in higher numbers than the rest of the population because certain villages along the Mekong rebelled massively and refused to drop their religion. However, there were fewer deaths among them, 33.7% against 25%. If you look at the population in its globality, then among the Catholics, 48.6%. And these are figures that should be compared to the number of people who disappeared from Phnom Penh, 41.9%. So, end of quote. So beyond the issue of figures, which I cannot discuss in depth because it's very, very difficult to bring up elements without having the author of the article being present here and and explain where his sources come from. But what's interesting to see here is that in the scholarly discussions among historians, we see that Henri Locard is pointing to the fact that what was stressed by Stephen Heder earlier, which is that we cannot speak about a desire or a will to commit racial genocide or to exterminate on the basis of race in democratic Cambodia, because the elements, such as he resituates them in democratic Cambodia, correspond more to political repression.
Élément de contexte sur
Another contextual element is what, Mr. President, I see it is 11:30. I only have a few documents to present, and I may need 15 to 20 minutes. I do not know whether you would like us to take the break now, and then I will slow down and complete my presentation after lunch.
It is now appropriate for our lunch break. We take a break now and resume at 1:30 this afternoon. Security personnel, you are instructed to take you some pawn to the waiting room downstairs and have him return to attend the proceedings this afternoon before 1:30. The court is now in recess.